Hello. Tonight we begin with one of the quietest enigmas in history, a small, unassuming book that sits in a library vault, waiting patiently for someone to understand its words. Imagine a room lit only by a desk lamp, the pages open in front of you, delicate vellum, faint ink lines, drawings of plants that seem almost familiar yet not quite right. Stars arranged in patterns no astronomer recognizes, and everywhere a flowing script that looks like it should make sense, but doesn't. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a 15th century codex that has calmly resisted every attempt to read it for over 600 years. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you're listening from somewhere special tonight, feel free to leave a comment with your location and local time. It's nice to know we're all settling in together. Now, dim the lights, take a deep breath, and let tonight's journey unfold around you. The story starts in 1912, in a Jesuit college near Rome called Villa Mondragone. A Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich was browsing a collection of old manuscripts the Jesuits needed to sell quietly. Among them he found a plain, unmarked volume bound in vellum. When he opened it, he saw page after page of careful handwriting in an alphabet he had never encountered, alongside coloured drawings of strange plants, circular diagrams, and small human figures. Voynich bought it on the spot. He spent the rest of his life trying to learn its secrets, but the book kept them. Today, the manuscript lives in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. It measures about 6 by 9 inches, small enough to hold in two hands, and contains around 240 pages, though gaps in the numbering show that some are missing. The parchment is calfskin vellum, smooth and pale. Radiocarbon dating done in 2009 at the University of Arizona places the material firmly between 1404 and 1438. That narrow window tells us the pages themselves are genuinely early 15th century. The ink and pigments match the period too. No modern materials hide here. Scholars usually divide the book into 6 main sections based on the drawings, since the text itself offers no headings or titles. The largest part is herbal. Over 100 pages show individual plants, each drawn full length with roots, leaves, flowers, and sometimes fruit. The plants look detailed and confident, as if the artist knew them well. Yet botanists have never found exact matches in the real world. Some roots resemble known species like viola or water lily, but the upper parts twist into forms that belong to no known plant. Others seem stitched together from different families. One page shows a sunflower-like bloom centuries before sunflowers reached Europe from the Americas. Historians still argue whether these are careful copies of real but now extinct species, deliberate fantasies, or coded representations of something else entirely. After the herbal pages come astronomical and astrological diagrams. Here the drawings grow circular. Wheels of stars, suns with wavy rays, moons in different phases. Zodiac symbols appear Pisces as 2 fish, Taurus as a bull, but the constellations around them don't match any known sky map. Small nude figures, mostly women, stand among the stars or hold them like objects. Some pages fold out to reveal larger charts. The colours are soft: blue, green, red, yellow, brown. The ink lines remain steady and calm. Then comes the section most people remember, the biological drawings. Page after page shows dozens of small, pale women, all unclothed, moving through networks of tubs, pools, and tubes filled with green liquid. Some hold objects near their bodies. Some appear pregnant. The tubes connect like plumbing or blood vessels, winding across fold-out sheets. The women look relaxed, almost content, as they bathe or float. Scholars have studied these pages carefully. In 2024, researchers Keegan Brewer and Michelle Lewis suggested the images relate to late medieval ideas about women's health, reproduction, and gynecology, topics often kept private and referred to as women's secrets. The drawings may illustrate baths, douches, or remedies involving fluids. Mainstream historians accept that gynecological knowledge circulated in the 15th century, but debate whether these particular images form a medical text. Next are cosmological foldouts, large, intricate circles that span several pages when unfolded. The biggest is a 9-page rosette diagram with castles, tubes, and text radiating outward. It feels like a map of the universe, or perhaps a symbolic view of creation. The pharmaceutical section shows roots and leaves next to jars and vessels, as if listing ingredients for medicines. Finally, pages of dense text with star-like markers look like recipes, short paragraphs each beginning with a decorated initial. Throughout the book, the same unknown script flows from left to right. Linguists call it Voynichese. The alphabet has about 25 to 30 distinct characters, some resembling Latin letters, others entirely new. Words are short, usually 2 to 8 characters. Sentences end with a slight upward stroke. The handwriting stays remarkably even across hundreds of pages. In 2020, analysis identified 5 different scribes, each with tiny differences in letter shape and spacing. Yet the overall style remains consistent, suggesting they worked closely together or followed the same model. Statistical studies show the text behaves much like a real language. Words repeat in patterns. Certain characters appear more often at the beginnings of lines, others at the ends. Entropy measures the way information is distributed fall between known European languages and more structured ones like Hawaiian or Chinese abbreviations. Some researchers find it closer to natural language than to random gibberish. Others point out small oddities. Almost no word repeats exactly on the same page, and very long words are rare. Attempts to read it began almost as soon as it resurfaced, in the 1660s. A letter accompanying the manuscript to scholar Athanasius Kircher claimed Emperor Rudolph II had owned it, and believed Roger Bacon wrote it. That idea lingered for centuries. World War II codebreakers from Britain and America tried their hand and walked away empty. Computer analysis started in the 1970s and continues today. Some claim Hebrew abbreviations, others see Proto-Romance or Turkish. A few suggest an East Asian influence. Every serious claim has met careful counter-arguments from linguists and cryptologists. No proposed reading has convinced the wider scholarly community. One quirky idea that surfaces now and then is that the book came from the New World, perhaps written in Nahuatl after the Spanish conquest and brought back on old vellum. The carbon dating makes that difficult, since the parchment is firmly pre-Columbian in Europe. Another fringe suggestion is that the entire manuscript is a clever forgery created by Wilfrid Voynich himself to sell at a high price. But the materials, the handwriting variations, and the provenance letters argue against it. In 2024, multispectral imaging of 10 pages revealed hidden details, faint corrections, earlier ownership notes, and attempts at decoding from the 17th century. One margin shows alphabet trials in Roman letters, early readers trying to match Voynichese characters to familiar ones. The imaging also confirmed no hidden underwriting or reused parchment. The book is exactly what it appears, a genuine 15th century object. Provenance traces back with gaps. A faint signature visible under ultraviolet light reads, Göbekli de Tepenitz, likely Jacobus Horsaki de Tepenec, imperial pharmacist to Rudolph II. Rudolph probably acquired it around 1600. Before that, the trail cools. Stylistic clues, swallowtail merlons on castle walls. Certain crown shapes point toward northern Italy or southern Germany. The manuscript has travelled quietly through history. Georg Beresch, a Prague alchemist, owned it in the 1630s and sent sample pages to Kircher hoping for help. Johannes Marcus Marci inherited it and forwarded the book itself in 1665. Then it vanished into Jesuit collections until Voynich found it. What was its purpose? Most careful researchers lean toward a compendium of knowledge, perhaps a herbal with medical and astrological notes, written in cipher to protect valuable recipes. Women's health may form a major theme. Others see a personal notebook, a philosophical treatise, or even an attempt at a universal language. The calm, methodical layout suggests someone took it seriously. One light aside, every few years a new solution makes headlines, only to fade under scrutiny. The manuscript seems almost amused by the attention, sitting unchanged while theories come and go. As we close this first part of our journey, picture the book on its shelf at Yale, protected in a climate-controlled vault. Researchers still visit, gloved and careful, turning pages under soft light. Digital scans are available to anyone with an internet connection, high-resolution images that let you zoom into every stroke, yet the words stay silent. The Voynich Manuscript does not shout its secrets. It simply waits, page after page, drawing after drawing, line after line of graceful, unreadable script. And in that quiet waiting lies much of its power. And so, from the silent pages of that unreadable book in its quiet library vault, we turn our attention across the ocean to another place where history holds its breath. Picture a narrow island off the coast of what is now North Carolina, low dunes covered in sea oats, the sound of waves steady on both sides. In the late summer of 1587, more than 100 English men, women, and children stepped ashore here, hoping to build the first lasting English home in the New World. By 1590, when a ship finally returned with supplies, every one of them had vanished. The buildings stood empty. The only marks left behind were two simple carvings, the letters CRO on a tree, and the full word Croatoan cut into a wooden post. This is the story of the Roanoke Colony, often called the Lost Colony, one of the calmest and most enduring disappearances in early American history. The beginnings go back a few years earlier. In 1584, Queen Elizabeth I granted Sir Walter Raleigh the right to claim lands in North America for England. Raleigh, a favourite at court, sent two captains, Philip Amadis and Arthur Barlow, to explore. They sailed along the Outer Banks, landed on what they called Roanoke Island, and met local Algonquian people. The natives welcomed them with food and trade. Two men, Manteo from the Croatoan tribe and Wanches from the Roanoke tribe, agreed to return to England. The explorers came home with glowing reports of fertile land and friendly inhabitants. Raleigh named the whole region Virginia after the Virgin Queen. In 1585, Raleigh organised a larger expedition. Sir Richard Grenville led 7 ships with about 600 men, mostly soldiers. Ralph Lane served as governor. They built a small fort on the north end of Roanoke Island. The plan was to use the spot as a base for privateering against Spanish ships. Relations with the locals started well, thanks to Manteo, but soon turned tense. Food ran short. Lane's men depended heavily on native villages. When one village withheld corn, Lane attacked and burned it, killing the chief Wingina. By spring 1586, the English were low on supplies and facing hostility. Sir Francis Drake arrived unexpectedly after raiding in the Caribbean. He offered to take them home. The colonists accepted. They left behind 15 men to hold the fort, with promises of quick resupply. Grenville returned soon after, found the fort empty of English but guarded by natives, and left another 15 men with 2 years of supplies. Then nothing more reached them. Those 30 men across both groups were never heard from again. Raleigh tried once more. This time he aimed for a true civilian settlement, not a military outpost. In 1587, he sent 117 people, 90 men, 17 women, and 9 boys under Governor John White, an artist who had joined earlier voyages. Among them were White's daughter Eleanor Dare and her husband Ananias. The plan was to settle farther north in the Chesapeake Bay area, where land seemed better for farming. Simon Fernandes, the Portuguese pilot, had other ideas. He stopped at Roanoke to check on the 15 men left by Grenville. No trace remained except scattered bones. Fernandes refused to sail farther north, claiming the season was too late. The colonists had no choice but to stay on Roanoke. They repaired the old houses and built new ones. On the 18th of August 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. 9 days later, a boy named Harvey was born to another couple. Manteo, who had returned with them, was baptized and named Lord of Roanoke by White. Food supplies dwindled quickly. The colonists urged White to return to England for help. He hesitated, worried about leaving his family, but agreed. He sailed on August 27, just as hurricane season began. The plan was to bring back supplies the next spring. England faced larger problems. The Spanish Armada threatened invasion in 1588. Every available ship went to defence. White managed to reach England, but resupply ships were delayed again and again. He finally joined a privateering fleet in 1590, hoping to reach Roanoke on the way. When White's ships arrived in August 1590, they found the settlement quiet. Houses had been carefully taken down, not destroyed. A palisade stood around the site for protection. On one post, the word Croatoan appeared in clear capital letters. On a nearby tree, the letters CRO, no cross or distress mark, as they had agreed for emergencies. White took this as a sign they had moved peacefully to Croatoan Island, now Hatteras, home of Manteo's friendly people, about 50 miles south. Storms prevented a full search. White's ship lost anchors and nearly wrecked. The fleet turned back toward England without reaching Hatteras. White never returned. He died years later, still uncertain. The 117 colonists, men, women, children, and the 2 babies simply disappeared from record. Over the centuries, people offered many explanations. Some thought Spanish forces from Florida found and killed them. Others suggested disease or starvation. A few believed they tried sailing home in small boats and were lost at sea. The most common idea from the beginning was that they joined nearby native groups. Early Jamestown settlers, in 1607, heard reports from Powhatan tribes of people with European features living inland. John Smith sent searches, but found nothing definite. One account mentioned houses with English goods far up rivers. Another told of a massacre of survivors. No solid proof emerged. In 1701, explorer John Lawson visited Hatteras Island. The Hatteras people told him some ancestors had been white, with grey eyes rare among natives. They preserved English coins and stories. Lawson thought some Roanoke survivors had joined them long ago. Tree ring studies from the 1990s showed severe drought between 1,587 and 1,589, the worst in 800 years. Crops failed. The colonists arrived too late to plant much. They likely faced hunger quickly. Historians still argue whether the group stayed together or split up. Some evidence points to division. John White mentioned a plan to move 50 miles inland if needed. Modern researchers have looked there too. One quirky detail from the records. Among the colonists was a scientist named Thomas Harriot, who had studied native languages earlier. He brought copper items for trade, valued highly by locals. Finds of European copper in native sites match that period. Archaeology has offered the calmest clues in recent decades. On Hatteras Island, excavations since the late 1990s uncovered mixed artifacts, native pottery alongside English items like sword parts, glass beads, a Nuremberg token, and writing slates. In 2025, digs found large amounts of hammer-scale tiny iron flakes from blacksmith work dated to the late 16th century. Natives did not forge iron then. This suggests English metal workers lived and worked there. Nearby, on Roanoke Island itself, in the Elizabethan gardens near Old Fort Raleigh, digs in 2023 and 2024 turned up Algonquian pottery shards next to a European copper ring. The ring style matches English trade goods. Charcoal and cooking pot fragments point to a native farmstead, perhaps where some colonists stayed briefly. Farther inland, in Bertie County, the first colony foundation explored sites marked on old maps. At Site X and nearby Site Y, they found 16th century English ceramics mixed with native materials. Ground-penetrating radar showed structures. These spots lie near river confluences, good for farming and escape. DNA projects continue. Some families in North Carolina claim descent from survivors. Tests compare modern Lumbee or other groups to known English lines. Results remain inconclusive, but grey eyes and certain surnames persist in areas where stories linger. The Dare stones caused a stir in the 1930s and 1940s. In 1937, a traveller brought a stone to Emory University with a message supposedly from Eleanor Dare. It described hardship, deaths, and burial inland. More stones appeared, telling a longer story of migration south. Scholars initially examined the first stone seriously. Later finds over 40 came from one area in Georgia. A 1941 investigation showed inconsistencies in language and chisel marks. Most now accept them as 20th century creations. perhaps for attention during the 350th anniversary. The original stone's authenticity remains debated, but few rely on it. One light note: every summer since 1937, an outdoor drama called The Lost Colony plays on Roanoke Island. Actors recreate arrivals, births, and the empty return. Audiences sit under stars near the actual site. The play keeps the story alive without claiming answers. As we settle into this part of the evening, imagine standing where John White stood in 1590. The fort quiet, waves gentle, the carvings fresh in wood. No bodies, no wreckage, just careful departure. The colonists took time to dismantle homes, salvage materials, leave a clear message. Most careful researchers today favor integration over catastrophe. The group likely split, some to Hatteras with Croatoan friends, others inland toward Chesapeake as planned, perhaps joining different Algonquian villages. Drought and delay forced hard choices. Over generations, descendants blended into native communities. European goods appear in archaeological layers across the region, but no mass grave or battle site. The word Croatoan was not a cry of despair. It was a direction, calm and deliberate. White understood it that way. Storms stopped the search, not doubt. 400 years later, digs continue quietly. Each season brings small finds, a shard here, a flake there. The story unfolds slowly, like pages turning in dim light. And in that gradual revealing lies the quiet power of Roanoke, not a sudden vanish, but a careful step into an unknown future, leaving only echoes and carvings behind. From the quiet clues left by those who stepped inland or toward the sea, blending into new lives long ago, we move now beneath the waves once more to a different shipwreck. This one carrying cargo from the 2nd century BCE. Imagine clear Aegean water, sunlight filtering down to a scattered heap of statues, amphorae, and coins on the seabed near a small island called Antikythera. Among the finds, divers in 1900 brought up a corroded lump of bronze, encrusted and broken. At first it seemed unimportant next to the marble figures and glassware. But when cleaned, it revealed delicate gear wheels, precise teeth, and faint inscriptions. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, a hand-powered device from ancient Greece that calculated the movements of the heavens. Often called the world's oldest known analog computer, it combined mathematics, astronomy, and fine craftsmanship in a way that surprised everyone who studied it. The discovery happened by chance. Sponge divers from the island of Simi, seeking shelter from a storm, anchored near Antikythera. One diver, descending deeper than usual in his heavy suit, spotted the wreck at about 60 meters. He reported statues lying on the bottom. The crew alerted authorities, and a formal salvage began with help from the Greek Navy. Over months in 1900 and 1901, they recovered bronze and marble sculptures, pottery, jewelry, and that odd bronze object. It went to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. There, in 1902, archaeologist Valerios Stais noticed gear teeth in one fragment. The device had split into several pieces from corrosion and impact. Mainstream scholars at the time thought ancient Greeks used simple tools, not complex gears. Early studies were limited. In the 1950s, historian Derek de Solla Price examined it closely with X-rays. He counted at least 30 gears and described it as a calendar computer. Price noted triangular teeth, cut by hand with remarkable precision teeth, about 1 millimeter long, evenly spaced. He dated the wreck to around 80 to 60 BCE, from coins and pottery. The mechanism itself seemed a bit older, perhaps made between 150 and 100 BCE. Modern research took off in 2005. An international team, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, used advanced imaging. They applied microfocus X-ray, computed tomography, and polynomial texture mapping. These revealed hidden gears, layers of components, and thousands of Greek letters inscribed on plates. About 3,000 characters survive from an estimated 15,000. The text acts like a user manual, explaining dials and functions. The device fits in a wooden case about the size of a large book, 33 centimeters high, 18 wide, 9 thick. Bronze plates covered front and back, with doors that open to reveal dials. A side crank turned the whole system. One turn advanced the main drive wheel by 1 day, though the exact ratio allows forward or backward movement for predictions years ahead. On the front face, a large dial shows the zodiac, divided into 12 equal 30-degree signs. An outer ring marks the Egyptian calendar, 12 months of 30 days plus 5 extra. Pointers move across these, one for the sun, one for the moon, showing its phase with a black and white ball. Other pointers likely tracked the 5 known planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Inscriptions above and below list star risings and settings, a parapegma calendar tying dates to visible constellations. The back holds 2 large spiral dials. The upper one follows the Metonic cycle, 235 lunar months over 19 years, aligning moon phases with the solar year. It names months from a Corinthian calendar, pointing to origins in that region or its colonies. A smaller dial inside tracks the Calippic cycle, refining the Metonic over 76 years. Another marks the 4-year cycle of Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics. The lower back dial uses the Saros cycle, 223 lunar months for repeating eclipses. Glyphs in cells predict solar or lunar eclipses, times and directions. A subsidiary dial shows the triple exeligmos cycle for fuller accuracy. How does it work? Everything starts from the crank. It turns a central drive wheel connected through gear trains. Ratios encode astronomical periods. For the sun, a simple gear train moves its pointer steadily around the zodiac once per year. The moon is more complex. Hipparchus had noted the moon speeds up and slows in its orbit. The mechanism uses a pin and slot system on epicyclic gears to model this anomaly. 2 gears on slightly offset axes create variable motion, matching observations closely. Planetary motions were trickier. Ancient Greeks used epicyclic or eccentric theories for retrograde motion. Recent models show nested tubes or compound gears for each planet, using Babylonian synodic periods, the time between alignments with the Sunday. Babylonian influence runs deep. Cycles like Saros and Metonic came from Mesopotamian records. Greeks adopted these arithmetic schemes, but added geometric models. The mechanism blends both Babylonian periods in gear ratios, Greek theory and variable speeds. One mainstream fact: the eclipse predictions match known Babylonian parameters, accurate enough for practical use over decades. Historians still argue whether the calendar ring on the front tracked a 365-day Egyptian solar year or a 354-day lunar one. Early assumptions favoured solar. But in 2024, researchers from the University of Glasgow applied statistical techniques originally for gravitational waves to surviving holes in the broken ring. They calculated a high probability of 354 holes, fitting a lunar calendar with 12 months of about 29.5 days. This aligns better with Greek practices and some inscriptions. A quirky detail: one reconstruction in Lego bricks works smoothly, showing the design's elegance could translate even to modern toys. In 2021, a team led by Tony Freeth at University College London proposed a full model for the front Cosmos display. It uses compound epicyclic gears to show planets against the zodiac, matching all known fragments and inscriptions. Their computer simulations demonstrate smooth operation. Other replicas exist. Michael Wright built working models in the 2000s. Greek researchers at Aristotle University created precise bronze copies. In 2024, a 10-times scale version opened at the University of Sonora in Mexico. These help test theories hands-on. One light note: the mechanism appeared in a recent Indiana Jones film as a time travel device. In reality, it travels through time only by predicting future skies. Debates continue on exact origins. Inscriptions suggest Rhodes, home to astronomer Hipparchus, who refined lunar theory. Cicero wrote of similar devices by Archimedes or Posidonius. No direct link, but the tradition likely passed through schools in Corinthian colonies. Manufacturing amazes experts. Gears were cast, then filed by hand. Teeth show slight variations, yet mesh well. Dividing circles evenly without modern tools required skilled dividers and steady hands. corrosion after 2,000 years underwater warped some parts. A 2025 study simulated tolerances and suggested manufacturing errors might have caused minor inaccuracies. Others counter that scans may exaggerate distortions from mineral buildup. Ongoing dives at the wreck site recover more context. Recent finds include wood from the hull and diverse amphorae, painting a picture of a wealthy merchant ship carrying luxury goods, perhaps from Asia Minor to Rome. The mechanism likely served educated owners, astronomers, philosophers, or wealthy patrons. It demonstrated cosmic order mechanically, blending science and wonder. Turning the crank brought the universe to life in miniature. As research progresses, new imaging refines readings. Multispectral techniques reveal faint letters. Each advance clarifies another gear or phrase. Picture it in use, a scholar in a quiet room, opening the doors, setting the crank to a date, watching pointers align with known skies, eclipses predicted years ahead, game cycles marked, planets positioned correctly. The Antikythera Mechanism does not overwhelm with size or noise. It works calmly, precisely, turning human knowledge into bronze motion. In its steady gears lies proof that ancient minds grasped the heavens deeply and built tools to hold them in their hands. From the precise bronze gears that once turned under a careful hand, modeling the paths of planets across the night sky, we shift our gaze eastward to the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine a small terracotta jar, about the size of a large coffee mug, sitting quietly in a museum case. Inside it, a rolled copper sheet forms a cylinder, and an iron rod stands upright in the center, held in place by plugs of bitumen at both ends. No wires extend from it, no switches, just simple materials arranged in a way that, when filled with an acidic liquid, quietly produces a small electric current. These artifacts, found near modern-day Baghdad in the 1930s, have come to be known as the Baghdad Batteries. Dated to the Parthian or early Sasanian period, roughly between 250 BCE and 250 CE, they raise calm questions about what people 2,000 years ago might have done with a faint spark of electricity. The discovery took place in 1936 during work near the village of Kujut Rabu, southeast of Baghdad, close to the ruins of Ctesiphon, once a grand capital of the Parthian and later Sasanian empires. Railway construction, or archaeological digs, uncovered several similar jars. Reports vary slightly on the exact circumstances, but the objects soon reached the Iraq Museum. Wilhelm König, a German archaeologist and then director of the museum's laboratory, examined them in 1938. He noticed the unusual setup: a clay pot about 14 centimeters tall, a copper cylinder inside, and an iron rod suspended without touching the sides. Asphalt sealed the top and bottom. König published a paper suggesting they resembled galvanic cells' early batteries. He had seen local jewelers in Baghdad using similar pots for simple chemical processes, and the idea stayed with him. Not just one jar appeared. Several similar vessels came from the site or nearby areas, including Seleucia on the Tigris. Some had copper cylinders, others did not. One well-preserved example became the focus. The copper sheet was rolled and soldered with lead-tin alloy at the bottom. The iron rod showed corrosion, as if exposed to acid long ago. Traces of papyrus-like material lingered inside some cylinders. The jars themselves were plain terracotta, unglazed, common for storage in that era. König dated them to the Parthian period, based on style and location. Modern analysis confirms a broad range from late Parthian to early Sasanian times. The empires spanned a vast region from the Euphrates to the Indus, rich in trade along the Silk Road. Craftsmen worked skillfully with metals, ceramics, and bitumen from natural seeps. The battery idea gained attention after World War II. In the 1940s, Willard Gray at General Electric built a replica. He filled it with grape juice and measured about half a volt. Simple but real current flowed between copper and iron through the acidic liquid. Later tests used vinegar or lemon juice, common in ancient diets, and got similar results around 0.5 to 1 volt per jar. In the 1970s, Arne Egerbrecht at a German museum reportedly used replicas with grape juice to deposit a thin silver layer on an object. He connected several jars for more power. Details of his work remain sparse, no photos or full reports survive from that time. Researchers at the same museum later searched archives and found no documentation. The claims spread widely, but careful scholars note the lack of records. The television show Mythbusters tested it in 2005. They built 10 accurate replicas, used fresh lemon juice, and connected them in series. The setup produced over 4 volts, enough to plate a small token overnight and send a noticeable tingle through thin needles placed in skin, like mild electrostimulation. Dry skin felt nothing strong. 5 jars gave a clear sensation through moist paths. These experiments show the design works as a basic galvanic cell. Copper and iron act as electrodes. An electrolyte like fruit, acid, or vinegar allows ions to move, creating voltage. 1 jar gives low power. Several linked together increase it. What might people have used it for? Ideas range from practical to ritual. One early thought was electroplating, coating silver with gold, or vice versa for jewelry. Parthian craftsmen made fine metalwork. Gilding existed, but usually through fire-mercury methods, where mercury carries gold and evaporates in heat. Traces of mercury appear on ancient gilded items from the region. No clear examples show electrolytic plating from that time. Tests suggest single jars produce too little current for thick layers. Even connected, deposits stay thin nanometers thick in some trials. No widespread plated artifacts match the period. Another suggestion points to medicine. Ancient texts from Greece and Rome describe using electric fish, like torpedo rays, for pain relief. Patients stood on live fish or held them to numb gout or headaches. In Mesopotamia, no electric fish swam local rivers. Perhaps a mild current from jars served similar ends. Bronze and iron needles found near similar vessels in Seleucia raise thoughts of early electroacupuncture. Silk Road trade brought ideas from China, where acupuncture developed. A gentle tingle through needles might ease aches. Historians still argue whether such knowledge reached Parthia, or if the needles served other purposes. A more common view among archaeologists sees the jars as storage for sacred scrolls. Similar pots held papyrus rolls in Jewish or Zoroastrian traditions. The copper cylinder protected fragile documents from insects or moisture. Bitumen sealed them. Iron rods might anchor rolls. Remains of papyrus-like material inside support this. Many such vessels appear in contexts with magical texts or incantation bowls, ceramic dishes inscribed with spells against demons, often buried upside down. Some bowls had fake writing or covered eggshells. The jars fit a ritual world of protection and hidden knowledge, not electricity. One mainstream historical fact: Parthian and Sasanian metalworkers used lost wax casting and fine soldering, as seen in surviving silver plates and statues. Their skill with copper and iron matches the jars perfectly. A quirky tidbit: during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, many artifacts vanished from the museum, including reports of the original Baghdad Battery jars. Their current location remains uncertain, though some accounts say replicas or photos preserve the details. Historians still argue whether the corrosion on the iron rod came from intentional acid or accidental exposure over centuries. Some tests find organic residues matching wine or vinegar, others see natural decay. No texts from the era mention electricity or batteries. No drawings show wires or connections. If used electrically, the knowledge stayed limited, perhaps a craft secret or occasional experiment. One light note: modern hobbyists build replicas at home with clay pots, copper tubing, and lemons. They light tiny LEDs faintly when many connect together, proving the old design still sparks interest. Context matters deeply. The jars appeared near incantation bowls and ritual items. Stacking them or burying them fits protective magic common in the region. Demons and illness often linked in ancient thought. Hidden scrolls with spells made sense. If electrical, why so few? Why no larger setups or clear applications? A single volt tingles the tongue. If wires touch it, perhaps a curiosity or ritual shock to prove divine power. But evidence leans quiet. Recent studies, including a 2025 review by archaeologists, emphasize the magical context. Jars from Seleucia sat among protective bowls. The setup resembles vessels for holding texts that ward off evil. Experiments continue calmly. Universities test electrolytes from ancient recipes, fermented dates, sour grapes. Results stay consistent. Low voltage, short duration before electrodes degrade. The artifacts do not demand dramatic answers. They sit as small, thoughtful objects from a time when trade brought ideas across continents, when craftsmen shaped metal with care, when people sought protection in written words and sealed pots. Picture a workshop in Ctesiphon. A potter forms the jar, a metalsmith rolls the copper, another inserts the rod and seals with warm bitumen. Perhaps a scroll rolls inside for safekeeping. Perhaps a liquid pours in for a brief, curious effect. The purpose fades with time, but the object remains. In museums today, replicas stand beside explanations. Visitors read the debates, watch simple demonstrations, and leave with quiet wonder. The Baghdad Batteries produce no loud revelations. They offer a gentle reminder that ancient lives held their own small mysteries, solved or unsolved, waiting patiently under the earth. From the simple terracotta jars that once held whatever secrets their makers intended, be they protective scrolls or faint electric sparks, we travel now farther back in time. To a limestone hill in southeastern Turkey where people raised massive stone rings long before anyone planted fields or herded animals. Picture a broad plateau under a wide sky, wind moving through tall grasses, and on the hilltop a series of large circular enclosures formed by walls of rough stone. In the center of each stand pairs of tall T-shaped pillars, some over 5 meters high and weighing 10 tons or more, carved from the bedrock nearby. Foxes, snakes, boars, birds and scorpions cover their surfaces in low relief. This is Göbekli Tepe, occupied from around 9,500 BCE to at least 8,000 BCE, a place that quietly challenges long-held ideas about when and why humans first built monumental structures. The site lies near the modern city of Şanlıurfa, overlooking fertile plains that feed into the Euphrates. Locals knew the hill as Göbekli Tepe Potbelly Hill for its rounded shape. In 1963, a joint Turkish-American survey noted scattered flint tools and broken limestone slabs, but mistook it for a Byzantine cemetery. It waited another 30 years for recognition. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited during a regional survey. He saw the T-shaped stones protruding from the soil and understood their age. Excavations began the next year under Schmidt and the German Archaeological Institute in partnership with Şanlıurfa Museum. After Schmidt's death in 2014, Turkish archaeologist Necmi Karul took over direction. The site became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2018. What makes Göbekli Tepe stand out is its date. The main layers belong to the pre-pottery Neolithic A and B periods, before clay vessels or domesticated plants and animals. Radiocarbon samples from organic material in the fill place construction between roughly 9,600 and 8,800 BCE. Some features may reach back closer to 10,000 BCE. Stonehenge, by comparison, began around 3000 BCE. The pyramids rose even later. Here, hunter-gatherers quarried, shaped, and erected megaliths on a scale once thought possible only after farming provided surplus food and settled life. At least 20 large enclosures lie under the mound, detected by geophysical surveys. Only a fraction, about 10%, has been excavated. The biggest, Enclosure D, measures around 20 meters across. Its ring wall holds 12 T-pillars, with 2 taller ones in the center. Enclosures vary in size and detail. Some pillars bear deep reliefs of animals, vultures, cranes, lions, bulls. Others show abstract signs, H-shapes, crescents, circles. A few pillars include carved arms, hands, and belts, making clear the T-shape represents a stylized human figure. Smaller rectangular buildings appear in later layers, often built into the fill of older enclosures. These have benches along walls and central hearths. Tools include grinding stones, flint blades, and pestles. Bone fragments come mostly from wild game, gazelle, aurochs, onager, red deer. Plant remains show wild cereals, einkorn, wheat, barley processed on site. Early interpretations saw Göbekli Tepe as a regional ritual center, Schmidt suggested mobile hunter-gatherers gathered here for ceremonies, perhaps funerals or feasts. The lack of permanent houses and the deliberate burial of enclosures supported this. People filled completed rings with rubble, sometimes breaking pillars first, then built new ones nearby or on top. This intentional decommissioning happened repeatedly over centuries. Recent work has shifted the picture. Deeper trenches and wider surveys reveal domestic features, rectangular buildings with floors, hearths, and storage pits. Water channels and cisterns collected rainwater on the dry hilltop. Thousands of grinding tools point to large-scale food processing. Residues on stones show cereal preparation, perhaps for porridge or early beer. In 2025, excavations confirmed living quarters, tools for daily tasks, and evidence of year-round occupation. Historians still argue whether the site housed a permanent population or served mainly seasonal gatherings with some residents. One mainstream fact: the pillars required organized labor. Moving a 10-ton stone from quarries a few hundred meters away needed dozens of people with ropes, levers, and rollers. Carving reliefs demanded skill and time. Coordination on this scale implies social hierarchy or strong communal bonds. A quirky detail: among recent finds, a painted boar statue in enclosure D keeps traces of red pigment on tongue and hair. Color on such ancient sculpture is rare and well preserved here. Nearby sites form a wider network called Tash Tepele Stone Hills. Karahan Tepe, 40 kilometers away, has similar enclosures and even more human figures. A life-size statue there shows a seated man holding his phallus. In 2025, Göbekli Tepe yielded its first life-size human statue, a figure with clear head and torso, found horizontally in a wall between structures, perhaps a votive offering. Other 2025 discoveries include additional circular enclosures detected by ground-penetrating radar, plus smaller buildings likely domestic. The carvings fascinate researchers. Animals appear fierce and varied. Vultures and headless men on one pillar suggest excarnation, leaving bodies for birds to strip flesh, a practice known later. Abstract symbols may mark clans or tally events. One theory sees pillar 43 inches, enclosure D, as a lunisolar calendar, with V marks counting days and animal symbols for constellations. Another links carvings to a comet impact around 10,900 BCE that triggered climate shifts. Most archaeologists favor symbolic or ritual meanings tied to daily life and beliefs. Construction techniques impress. Workers cut pillars from bedrock benches, leaving negative shapes still visible in quarries. They used flint chisels and abrasives. Transport involved wooden sledges or rollers. Erecting required pits, ramps, and counterweights. Benches around enclosure walls held additional pillars or served seating. Food evidence points to feasting. Vast quantities of animal bones show butchery marks. Large stone vessels could hold liquids. Grinding slabs processed wild grains intensively. Beer residues appear on some stones. Gatherings likely involved shared meals that strengthened social ties. Why build here? The hill offers views across plains rich in game and wild cereals. Water seeps provided springs then. Location may hold astronomical significance. Some enclosures align towards certain stars or solstice points. Others see it as neutral high ground for groups from surrounding areas. Abandonment came gradually. By 8000 BCE, people filled the last enclosures and left. Rectangular houses appear briefly in upper layers, then the site lay empty. Climate dried, populations shifted toward rivers, and full farming emerged elsewhere. One light note: every year thousands visit under protective roofs. Walking paths let people stand near pillars that stood untouched for millennia. New visitor facilities, including a center and paths, opened by late 2025. Debates continue calmly. Was it primarily ritual or residential? Did complex beliefs drive organization, or did organization enable beliefs? Did large projects push people toward farming, or did early farming free time for building? Evidence grows with each season. As we near the end of tonight's quiet journey, imagine standing on the hill at dusk. Wind carries the same dry scent it did 12,000 years ago. Pillars rise silent, animals watching from stone. People long gone gathered here, carved their world into limestone, ate together, marked time and sky. They buried their works carefully, perhaps to protect or end them. Much still lies under soil, waiting for careful hands. Göbekli Tepe does not demand answers tonight. It simply reminds us how far back human hands shaped lasting things, how early minds turned stone into symbol and gathering into something grand. From the wind-swept hill where carved pillars still stand guard over the plains of southeastern Turkey, we step back quietly and look across everything we have visited tonight. A small book with unknown writing rests in a Yale vault. An empty settlement waits on a North Carolina island, its only message carved in wood. Delicate bronze gears lie in an Athens museum, once turning to match the sky. Simple clay jars sit in storage, their purpose still debated. And massive stone rings rise from a prehistoric mound, built before anyone tamed wheat or sheep. 5 separate places, 5 separate times, yet they share something calm and lasting. Each one holds a question that refuses to close. Tonight, in this final part, we simply sit with those questions and listen to what they gently tell us about being human. These mysteries do not shout, they wait. The Voynich Manuscript has waited over 600 years for someone to read its lines. Roanoke has waited more than 400 years for the full story of its people. The Antikythera Mechanism waited 2,000 years underwater before anyone understood its gears. The Baghdad jars waited quietly in museum drawers for decades before experiments gave them a voice. Göbekli Tepe waited 12,000 years beneath soil and grass. In every case, the waiting itself feels part of the message. Knowledge can disappear, then return when someone is ready to look again. Each site reminds us how easily understanding slips away. A language can vanish if no one teaches it. A colony can leave only 2 carved words. A machine can sink with its ship and become a lump of metal. A ritual jar can lose its meaning when the people who used it are gone. A temple complex can be filled in and forgotten while new ways of living take over. History is not a steady line forward. It is a path with gaps, places where the trail stops, and we have to guess the next step. Yet the gaps also show something hopeful. People keep looking. The Voynich pages are scanned in high resolution and shared online. Anyone with a computer can study them tonight. Archaeologists return each season to Hatteras and inland sites, finding small pieces of English pottery beside native ones. Divers go back to the Antikythera wreck with better tools. Researchers test new liquids in replica jars. Excavators carefully clear rubble from Göbekli enclosures, learning more with every layer. Curiosity outlasts silence. Questions draw new minds long after the original answers fade. These places teach us about limits too. We want clear endings. We want the manuscript translated, the colonists found, the gears fully explained, the jars proven one way or another, the pillars given a single meaning, but the evidence often stays partial. A few letters remain readable on the Voynich pages, not enough for certainty. A few European items turn up near native villages, not enough for proof. A few gear trains survive in the mechanism, not all of them. A few jars appear with copper and iron, not dozens. A few enclosures stand open, most still buried. The past gives us fragments, and we learn to work with fragments. Working with fragments changes how we think. It asks for patience. It asks us to hold several ideas at once. The manuscript might be a cipher, or a private language, or a careful hoax. The colonists might have joined friendly villages, or split into smaller groups, or met hardship we have not found. The mechanism might have predicted planets perfectly, or only approximately. The jars might have produced a tingle for healing, or simply stored scrolls. The pillars might mark seasons, or ancestors, or stories we no longer recognize. Good questions stay open longer than quick answers. One quiet pattern runs through all 5. People made things that mattered to them. Someone spent years writing and drawing the Voynich book with steady care. Someone dismantled houses neatly and carved a clear destination before leaving Roanoke. Someone cut precise teeth into bronze to match the moon's uneven path. Someone sealed copper and iron into clay with warm bitumen. Someone hauled 10-ton stones uphill and carved animals that still seem alive. Effort on this scale usually means belief. Belief in knowledge worth keeping, in a place worth reaching, in a sky worth modelling, in protection worth crafting, in symbols worth raising. We may not share the belief, but we can recognize the devotion behind it. Another pattern. None of these mysteries needed modern technology to exist. The Voynich writer used ink and vellum, available in any medieval scriptorium. The Roanoke settlers used axes and knives they brought on ships. The Antikythera craftsmen worked with files and dividers known across the Greek world. The jar makers used clay, copper, and iron common in Parthian workshops. The Göbekli builders used flint tools and muscle. Great questions can begin with ordinary materials in skilled hands. At the same time, each site shows knowledge moving across distances. The Voynich style hints at northern Italy or southern Germany, yet travelled to Prague and then Rome. Roanoke drew on plans first tested in earlier English voyages. The Antikythera Mechanism blended Greek geometry with Babylonian cycles carried along trade routes. The Baghdad jars sat on Silk Road paths where ideas from China, India, and Rome met. Göbekli Tepe lies at the edge of the Fertile Crescent, where new ways of living spread outward. Mysteries often grow where different worlds touch. Children appear in several stories too. Virginia Dare and the Harvey Boy were born on Roanoke, stepping into uncertainty from their first breath. The small nude figures in the Voynich biological pages may represent ideas about birth and health. The Göbekli pillars, with their belts and hands, stand like watchful adults over a world just beginning to settle. Even the Antikythera device, turned by hand, feels like something an elder might show a younger person to explain the sky. These places touch on passing things forward: language, survival, understanding, ritual, wonder. One light note across the nights. Every one of these mysteries has inspired modern copies. People print Voynich pages to study at home. Reenactors build Roanoke-style houses on the island each summer. Engineers craft working Antikythera models from bronze or even plastic bricks. Hobbyists fire clay jars and test them with fruit juice. Visitors walk beside full-size pillar replicas at Göbekli Tepe. Making our own versions keeps the conversation going. Hands-on work often teaches more than reading alone. Historians still argue about each site, and that argument itself feels healthy. New scans reveal faint Voynich corrections. New digs find more mixed pottery near former Roanoke areas. New modelling refines the missing planetary gears. New residue tests check ancient electrolytes. New trenches uncover domestic buildings at Göbekli. Debate keeps the questions alive and prevents easy myths from hardening. What do these echoes tell us, in the end? That being human has always meant living with unknowns. That we build, write, carve, calculate, and gather partly to push back against the dark but never fully. That losing knowledge is as common as gaining it. That finding fragments centuries later can still move us. That curiosity is older than cities, older than writing, older than metal tools. Tonight we have moved across 12,000 years and several continents, from hunter-gatherer circles to medieval scriptoria, from Aegean shipwrecks to Mesopotamian workshops, from American coastal islands to library vaults. The distances feel large, yet the impulse feels familiar. To make sense of the world, to leave a mark, to reach towards something larger, to protect what matters, to understand where we stand under the sky. None of the 5 mysteries has closed its door. They stay open, quietly inviting the next careful look, the next patient question, the next small discovery, and in that openness lies something restful. We do not need every answer tonight. We only need to know the questions are worth carrying. So as the hours grow late, picture each place one last time. The unreadable pages under soft library light, the empty fort by the sound with its carved words still legible, the bronze gears waiting in their case, the modest clay jars on a shelf, the tall pillars on their hill, animals watching the plain. They have all waited a long time. They can wait a little longer. And we can rest now, carrying their calm questions with us into sleep.